So we have another Leganto presentation, and I'm pleased to introduce our next speakers, Adele McDonald and Sarah Lucas from the Learning Success Team at Curtin University Library. Adele is the coordinator of the team and has extensive experience in academic librarianship. Sarah is a librarian new to the academic libraries and comes from a background in both public and government libraries, specializing in digital services and legal research. They are both very new to working with Leganto and will be sharing insights on implementing automatic copyright workflows for improved efficiency in the reading list space. Please welcome our next speakers, Adele and Sarah.
Thank you, Caroline. So we're very happy to be here today. And that was a great introduction to some of us. Do you want to move along the slide, Sarah? Great. So we'd like to start today by saying we're presenting today from beautiful Wajak Noongar Boodja. And would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to all First Nations people across Australia and New Zealand, including all of the lands people are joining from today. So just to get a little bit more of an idea of who we are and why we're kind of doing this with copyright workflows, I'm going to give a bit of a background. So Curtin so obviously had extensive experience with e-reserve and reading list services, spanning back at least 20 years. We've worked with statutory licensing and copyright constraints fairly similarly throughout this time. I myself have a fairly long history with the Curtin Library, mostly been working in lending fulfillment area and now in our kind of information literacy learning success services. So as Caroline just mentioned, Sarah's also joined us with a background in digital services at public libraries, as well as honed expertise in research in special libraries. So this has kind of necessitated a fairly quick adaptation to Alma and Leganto environments for Sarah. And her fresh perspective has been really kind of incredibly useful throughout the project. So last year, Curtin undertook a fairly significant structural change with staffing. We disbanded our traditional collections team and distributed those functions to other library teams. So the reading list service came to our learning success team, and it does seem to sit fairly naturally within our remit. With the service, we got also a library technician in addition to Sarah as a librarian, but Sarah was employed as a brand new librarian. So we did also have some staff redundancies throughout that process, which kind of meant that there wasn't much opportunity for a huge handover from previous staff. Though we do still have our library systems analyst, David Lewis, and he's an amazing asset and font of knowledge for us. So with this essential kind of reduction in staffing that we have, we're kind of looking to create more efficiencies with the service, but the circumstances that we're in kind of mean that we're battling the unknown to a large extent. So one of our first challenges with reading lists was to implement the new user interface late last year, as we were also trying to kind of come to grips with everything that had happened. Through that small project of the new UI last year, we reached out to other libraries in Western Australia with Leganto for some advice. And we had great discussions with staff at both UWA and Notre Dame. One of the things that kind of popped up a lot in those conversations that we picked up on was the use of automatic copyright approvals. And we thought that that could be a really useful way to create some efficiencies for us and improve services for our clients. So From those initial kind of early conversations, our colleagues from Notre Dame and UWA generously shared with us some of their procedure documents. And Sarah valiantly tackled extracting some useful information out of the ex libris documentation, which we know can be a bit curly sometimes. And we're also able to obtain and dust off our electronic use survey data from our previous survey period, with some help from David. So Sarah's been tasked with reviewing our current system configuration and procedures, such as we inherited them. And I'll now hand across to Sarah to discuss this in some more depth.
Thanks, Adele. Hiya, everybody. So of course, our work in reading lists doesn't occur in a vacuum, and it touches other parts of the system and other areas in the library. So it's been quite essential to ensure that changing our workflow wouldn't create problems for other work areas. Because neither Adele nor I were involved in setting up the configuration for Leganto or for reading lists in general, that meant first mapping existing configuration settings and understanding the effect of each. One area we knew from the outset that would be impacted was the reporting for the electronic use survey for the Copyright Agency, which required and still requires ongoing collaboration and consultation with key staff, including David, our systems analyst, and where needed, our copyright officer as well. So using analytics from previous year's EUS reporting, we identified which fields we were currently obtaining data through bibliographic records for, and created a list of suggested alternatives based on citation record metadata instead for our systems analyst to review, which is currently being reviewed at the moment. To get a picture of how the system was operating, I read through copious ex libris documentation to identify and create a list of configuration settings relevant to copyright approval for reading lists. So I've gathered those in a spreadsheet to record current settings, proposed settings, and start building a change log that we can use going forward so that when future system changes come down the pipeline, we aren't starting from scratch again. As part of this process, we identified and undertook a series of what you might call side quests, other areas of the reading list workflow that could be improved to deliver a more efficient service. We've reviewed templates for our notices, citation material types currently in use, and non-copyright related configuration settings that could be changed for better efficiency. Throughout all of this, it's been really important to know what our ideal workflow looks like to ensure these conversations stay grounded and on course, and to ensure that the configuration changes we make are fit for purpose. Keeping that end goal in mind makes all the many small decisions for projects like this easier to make. As one might expect for someone as new to ex libris software and academic libraries as I am, taking on a project like this, it's been necessary to borrow a term from tabletop role-playing games that I play too much of, level up a bit. This has meant a crash course in reading lists, ALMA and Leganto. After running through the Leganto Become an Expert and ALMA Essentials series, Adele, our reading list library technician Sally, and I all completed the ALMA administration certification. And then the three of us have also been working through the ALMA analytics training materials. I've also worked on building some analytics of my own to put that training into use and really consolidate that learning. And then, of course, making progress on our side quests to this project, including updating template replies to links marked as broken and updating the configuration for list status reversion when new citations are added to completed reading lists have also been helpful skill development endeavors. As with any undertaking of this nature, the more progress we make, the more challenges arise, but we do not need to face these challenges alone, and we've been fortunate to have a wealth of allies ready and willing to offer information, insight, and assistance. A recent challenge has been some concerns raised about doing away with cataloguing materials provided solely for reading lists under statutory licensing and how that might affect various parts of our reporting and workflow. But those very same colleagues who raised these concerns have been our greatest allies in meeting those challenges and are on board with our plans. They have the knowledge and interest necessary to help us find a solution that gets us to that end goal. Data migration is a significant undertaking. we must move all statutory licensed materials from ALMA D to citation upload saved in S3 buckets. And of course, getting the EUS right is an enormous challenge. The reporting needs to be effective for citations created both before and after implementation. The last challenge also relates to the EUS, because at Curtin, some of our courses have multiple availabilities or instances, depending on whether the delivery is at Bentley, online via OUA, or at one of Curtin's many other global campuses. These are generally course collapsed, but not always, and when they aren't collapsed, duplication of reading list citations can occur, which necessitates deduplication of data for the EUS. Through all these challenges, we've been fortunate to be able to reach out not only to our colleagues here at Curtin for help, but to our colleagues at nearby institutions. The University of Notre Dame and UWA, as Adele mentioned, have been great allies in this project since before I came on board at Curtin. And colleagues from across Australia and New Zealand, including Jessie from Bond and Deborah from Lincoln, who we heard from earlier, have been kind enough to answer my call for information on the Leganto mailing list. The big takeaway for us from this has been that the academic library community in Australia and New Zealand is robust and willing to share information. So, our dragon is still yet to be slain, but we are well on the way now. We've gathered supplies and sketched a map of the road ahead and the dragon's lair. We formed a party of allies and tested our mettle against a lesser dragon. And what lies left on the path before us? Well, developing new analytics for the EUS is first and foremost, which requires us to finalize some decisions on how information will be recorded. Once this has been decided, we can set about migrating files and copyright data for existing statutory license material. And of course, before implementing such a significant change, we are currently conducting testing of these configuration changes in Sandbox to ensure all works as expected. That spreadsheet I created of configuration settings has come into play for that, as I've been able to use that to log each iteration that I've been testing as I go. As we work through this testing in Sandbox, we're using that testing process to capture the procedural elements and write up new procedures ahead of the go live date. And then, of course, as with any change, to ensure the instructors and library staff experience a seamless transition, we'll draft communications to send to each of these groups, tailored to what they each need to know. Then once these steps are finalized, we'll be ready to decide on a go live date and roll out our change in production to declare victory. All right, thank you, and we'll happily answer any questions. I think Adele's got the chat up.
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, Kat, for that comment. We have been, well, that's the royal we, mostly Sarah has been scanning through all of the kind of our internal analytics reports, but also community zone ones, looking for information. Yes, I think it's great to share information across the whole gamut of institutions that are on ALMA, Leganto. It's the best way to move forward rather than doing things in a vacuum. Yes, timing is also a big thing, I think, with reading lists as a system, because there's so many different operating systems. So, and the rolling semesters and different study periods that we have at Curtin is honestly a complete nightmare. So, yeah.
That's also really interesting to hear, Peter, about Bond, because we'll be talking to Jessie on Friday about the EUS. So that's really good timing for us.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if you've looked at that, Sarah. So distinct copyright messages pop up for specific communication kinds. I don't know that we've looked at that yet.
So far, I've mostly been able to see just the ability to get copyright pop-up messages depending on the type of citation, as in if it's uploaded or if it's catalogued and then linked as a digital representation. But if we can do it for different parts of the legislation, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. We don't rely on 200 AB very often, but we do sometimes make copies for incarcerated students and things under that provision. So it would be interesting if we could make the system work for us in that respect.
Makes sense to do it that way too, because I'm sure for most of us, there's much less of the 200 AB material.
Just read through PETA's comment so that it's captured in the recording. I feel like it's useful information for everyone. So PETA said that they use Almaty for 200 AB and Leganto for all the rest. Our Leganto pop-up says this has been communicated under 113 or a Creative Commons license or with direct permission, sort of a catch-all. Thanks, PETA. We have one last minute for any other questions. There's nothing else. Thank you so much, Adele and Sarah, for sharing your experience and journey with us. We'll have a 20-minute break before the next presentation at 2:20 p.m.